Chairwoman Berrien, we just really truly thank you for opening your doors for that. We recognize how important it is also the partnership. We also recognize through the New Jersey Affirmative Action Officers Council that you mentioned the importance of also the partnership as well. And in fact, some of you may not know this, but if you look at our theme, the second half of our theme actually is the vision of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And that is a strong and prosperous nation secured through a fair and inclusive workplace. That's their vision. When we had conversation, we decided that's what we wanted to make part of our thing. So that's a strong indication of her position, what they're doing at the national level. And in terms of partnership as well, one of the things that we try to do with 4As is to be able to reach out to the broader community, diversify our leadership beyond education to include the project sector, ministry, and we now have someone who is representing a federal agency, and that's Julie Johnson, who is a member of our board now. And when I talked about profound and prophetic, and let me just tell you that you said that we are uniquely situated. We are, not only individually, but collectively, and we cannot waver because of the political climate in terms of our mission is what we are to be about. And we certainly again thank you for that. Our job is to be able to, when we come in our given workplaces, to make it better than when we came into it. That's our goal. I would like to be able, on behalf of the Berrien Affirmative Action Association, American Association for Affirmative Action, as well as the New Jersey Affirmative Action Officers Council, to present you with this small token and appreciation if you come and make your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
A small token also to give Ernest Case. And Ernest, let me just tell you, when I do another speech, I'm going to fly to anybody.
Thank you so
We really do. I appreciate it. Now, I don't know whether there is maybe one or two questions before we get this.
Yes. In Ohio, our Ohio Civil Rights Commission has been severely cut, and I know they're a deferral agency. Is this happening all around the country, and how is that impacting the work that you do?
It is happening in many parts of the country, and I believe it was a month or so ago that we had our annual meeting of the state and local fair employment practice agencies with whom we collaborate. It is a two-for occurrence, and it is definitely an additional strain on the resources that we have. And of course, one of the things that I said when I talked about this year is that they are experiencing cuts and limitations in budget and resources at the same time that we are. So it is a challenging time at both of those levels, and we recognize some of those challenges. We have at times been able to assist some of those agencies in making their case in the states. And when I'm on the Hill, I certainly have conversations very often with members of Congress about the importance of those agencies and how they work in partnership with us to enforce the laws. So certainly their restrictions, budget restrictions, are something that have an impact as well on us, in addition to the people in those states. Yes.
I know some state agencies are asking employers when they're doing investigations what training they're doing, and a series of questions. Could you comment about, as an EEOC investigator, what inquiries do they have around the training, preventative actions employers are taking or have taken?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, for example, in California, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, when they do an investigation of, say, harassment, they'll ask the employer, have you done harassment training? Has it been mandated? Who's attending? What are you delivering? The quality of the program?
Well, we certainly in some of our cases that have been litigated or resolved through litigation, one of the frequent provisions of any court order or consent decree is a provision for training of various kinds of training. And I should say that an important part of our work and what we make available are both paid and free outreach and training programs to try to make sure that people are kept up to date on the law and what it requires. So certainly it is a best practice to have and to make available to people who are in supervisory capacities, people who are hiring, people who are in a position to impact any aspect of the employment relationship, that they have an understanding of what the law would require, what it prohibits, and what it allows. There's a lot of information on our website that can be used for that purpose. I especially commend to you our Q&A documents, which are documents that are oriented more towards a lay audience. Those are things that we often use when we do training and outreach with small businesses and other entities that may or may not have in-house counsel or representation. And that's all on our website, eeoc.gov. Yes?
What is the EEOC's position on credit checks for prospective finalists in the job pool? Because I know that when a person applies for a job, they may be semi-finalist position. A lot of institutions do credit checks, which may be somewhat discriminatory depending upon the ratio of their background.
So in October, the commission had a public meeting on this and received testimony from a range of witnesses who talked about the potential discriminatory impact on different groups. But very broadly, I would say credit checks and really any sort of screening standard or criterion, we will look, and the courts would ultimately look, to determine whether or not the use of that practice or policy or screening device is related to the job, and whether applying that standard advances some necessity of operating the business. So, just to pick an example, if money handling or access to money is involved, an employer might say that they need to make an assessment of whether or not someone is vulnerable to theft or would be tempted to steal. But one of the things that our meeting on credit checks established is that credit history is not a perfect proxy for any particular standard or criteria. What it tells you is something, assuming it's accurate, and that was one of the things we heard testimony about. It is not always accurate, and people are not always aware of the things that may be inaccurate in their credit history unless they've had reason to, give their credit report recently. But it's not necessarily a perfect proxy for any particular characteristic or criteria, like trustworthiness. So I think that we're looking very closely at whether we can provide additional written guidance that helps to explain when or how credit might be used by employers, or credit history might be used by employers. But very importantly, also when it could be problematic to use it in terms of law, and also what things might be more effective and less discriminatory ways to do the same thing. And it could be, for example, that there are controls about what people who handle money in the workplace have to do that would be a more effective way of dealing with the issue of possible employee theft rather than trying to project ahead based on a credit history. So we are looking at the possibility of releasing some additional guidance that would help to guide employers in that way.
Let's take one more question.
Yes.
What are the prospects of getting a protection at the federal level for people based on sexual orientation?
The Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which was introduced in the last Congress, would have specifically addressed discrimination, workplace discrimination, on the basis of sexual identity, sexual orientation. It did not pass in the last Congress. There are two ways, though, that I think exist, even in the absence of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, that people need to be aware of. One, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. And there have been courts that have recognized that where an employer acts based on some sort of sex stereotyping, that a particular behavior is feminine or masculine, for example, and acts adversely based on that, that it is possible to pursue a claim even under the existing law. So there are cases that have been brought by people, for instance, who are undergoing a sex change procedure that sometimes have been successful under that theory. The other thing is that there are some state and local laws that expressly include sexual orientation or identity. And I practiced for a number of years in New York, for example, and the New York human rights law, the city law, does reach those issues as well. So the short answer is right now there's not a federal protection that's explicit, but Title VII's prohibition against sex discrimination has been interpreted by courts to reach that practice in some instances. And ENDA is reintroduced in this Congress. It has not come to any vote. And I should say, my predecessor as chair, my immediate predecessor, Stuart Ishimaru, who was the acting chair of the agency for a year and a half, did testify in support.
Okay, let's give her another round.